The Wall Street cheat sheet. In today's video, guys, we're going to be jumping down into the Wall Street cheat sheet to take a look at the structures of what people expect to see, what's currently going on, and where I think we could be on this journey to the downside or to the upside. You know, it's possible that maybe we're in disbelief and we've had depression, anger, capitulation, panic, denial, anxiety, complacency, or maybe, just maybe, we're actually just in complacency and we're yet to even see capitulation or anger. So in this video, if you find it useful and informative, smash that like button. I do appreciate that. If you're new to the channel, then why not go ahead and subscribe? You can always unsubscribe later. If you haven't joined us in Discord yet, though, guys, check it out, linked in the description below. It's the first place that we go to notify you of everything that's going on in the crypto space, so why not check it out? Linked in the description below. Let's get right down into this one. So this is a question that came up during our AMA with our Patreon members yesterday, and it was an interesting one. Chris brought it up as basically, you know, a lot of people kind of thinking that they're in the disbelief area. I personally think that we've got a bit of a journey down to the depression area before we have the disbelief. But Chris, you know, raised an interesting point. He said on the bigger, larger time frames, it actually looks more like we're in complacency. So let's go ahead and address that kind of thought pattern. Are we in complacency, or are we actually, you know, much further down the line? And well, to do this, first thing we need to do is kind of just take this down a little bit so we can see the candlesticks behind it, and we'll zoom in just a fraction on what is going on with our candles, right? So ultimately we have a weekly chart here, okay? And our weekly chart has our all-time high at $69,000. We had that initial pullback down towards $32,000, rallied up to $48,000, dropped down to 17, relief rally up to I think 25, and then down into the 15s, and then we obviously have pushed up towards 31 right now. And what's interesting is that rally to the upside could potentially be that complacency. So if I go ahead and actually try to make this fit a little bit better into here, you can kind of see that, let me bring this across more like this. There you go. If I try to overlay this just a little bit, you can kind of see how we have this movement from euphoria down and then a relief rally up to complacency. I can see how some people kind of are looking at this initial move to the downside as that initial pullback, then up into complacency before we come down into the anxiety, to denial, panic, and then capitulation. And I do think it's an interesting one. I think maybe that's a bit of hopium from the kind of the bearish side of things, because I don't personally see it working out that way, because if we were to think of that, then we are going to have to come down very, very significantly to the point of where we might see Bitcoin going below $3,000 again. And I don't think that's something that's really going to happen. I think there's going to be far too much buying pressure to allow price to be in those low ranges for too long. And considering most of the supply isn't held by like a single wallet, there's not like one entity that's going to be able to do that. And then there's definitely some people like MicroStrategy and so forth, but for the majority of larger wallets, they've been on the decrease for quite some time. There's not like they've been accumulating just to kind of flood the market. I mean, with the exception of the Kraken-sized wallet, of course, that we often talk about. But for the most part, I don't think we have like a huge collective amount of Bitcoin that can just be dropped on the market to really, you know, push that price into that kind of level. So I'm not confident in thinking that we're going to see significant lows like that. Instead, I think we're a little bit further on the journey. But it is an interesting one when we start zooming out and we can start to then, you know, place ourselves anywhere on the chart of this Wall Street cheat sheet. So one of the things I guess that I need to talk about in this video is that you can kind of make it do whatever you want, and that's half the battle and half the problem. Because anyone who wants to be bearish on the market can make it look like complacency, and anyone who wants to be bullish on the market can make it look like we're in disbelief, right? I.e., we're all the way over here. And it doesn't really make it easy for retail investors to truly understand where you are, specifically when you've got like massive swings in opinions. So I think that, you know, you have to kind of take everything with a pinch of salt. You know, I think that we are down here just based on the daily time frame. But if I were to go on to a smaller time frame, it might look like we're in disbelief, right? And so I think we have to kind of pay attention to many other things that are going on outside of just what a couple of candlesticks might look like on a chart. So we have to take a look at the broader economic climate. What's going on with the US in terms of the interest rates, the inflation, whether there's going to be a pivot, what happens historically when the Fed pivot, all the way through to what's going on outside of the US, what's going on in Europe, right? We've got regulations, MiCA, we've got so many other things going on, with Russia and China and Taiwan and Ukraine, of course. And so there's a lot of things going on in the world that could be issues. And then, of course, there's the effects of inflation and the rising cost of living on retail investors. Retail investors with, record high credit card debt and record low savings accounts. And unfortunately, a lot of the cryptocurrency at the moment is held by those retail investors who have no savings and high credit card debt. And so as a result of these fundamental things happening in the real world, we have to kind of consider ourselves maybe not as bearish as complacency and not as bullish as disbelief, but in a state where we can see further downside, but maybe not to those kind of crazy low levels. And so that's kind of where I've always been kind of positioned, somewhere sat in the middle between the super bears and the super bulls, right? I want a bullish market, but I don't think we're there yet. And until we kind of see retail investors shaken out of the space and larger investors coming into the space, it's hard to think that we're really going to be seeing any form of significant upside. And I do think there's going to be a lot of selling pressure as we start to see mounting pressure from mortgage rates on the increase, more people's mortgages doubling, when of course no savings and high credit card debt playing their toll. Eventually, to sustain their current lifestyles, retail investors are going to have to end up selling some assets off in order to be able to actually facilitate consistency within their lifestyles. So I think that we're going to see some interesting times, right? It could just be that we're in the denial area and we get to have the capitulation and the anger. I personally think that maybe we're about to have capitulation, or this is the capitulation before we have anger or depression. I think we're somewhere around here. It's really quite difficult to say for certain, and that's only if we're following this particular model anyway. There's lots of things with this that I disagree with, and the idea of you're being in this particular pattern all the time, specifically during bear markets or bullish markets, and ultimately I think we're doing things vastly different than we have seen previously as well. This here, by the way, as well, guys, is a very clear structure when it comes to impulsive movements. We can see that this would be considered a 5-wave Elliott wave impulsive structure to the downside. Right, we'd look at a wave 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, which means that would be a position that would start a 5-wave. If you start with 5-wave, you end in 5 waves. So even though we would see this here, I would look at this and say, okay, well, we go up in 3, we've got to come down in 5, which means you would have to break these lows anyway. So it'd be an interesting kind of thing to kind of see how this does play out. I disagree with thinking that we're in complacency. If anything, I would say that we are either in capitulation at the moment, or we are in this anger, just coming out of this anger before we have depression. I think we're more likely to be down here than we are up here. But, I'm open to opinions and thoughts on that one. Ultimately, I disagree with the disbelief in the same way that I disagree with the complacency. I don't think we have the broader economic climate to support the idea that we've actually had the depression already and that we're moving on out. We haven't really seen that pain just yet. It's been pretty difficult recently. It's pretty much since November. But before November, it was very, very easy, this bear market. It wasn't exactly difficult. And I still think that although a lot of people kind of got massively damaged through the FTX saga when we got those lows in, I do not think that that's enough damage done to retail investors, and therefore the depression I think will come much later down the line. Recession, pivot, and when the Fed pivot, you normally see a significant crash in the markets. So ultimately that's kind of where I'm thinking that we've still got to have the depression. I kind of said before, it looks like anger may have actually come on in and we're just in this movement, but I'll also say that it could be capitulation as well. So that's kind of where I am. I'm kind of sat between those two areas, right? The super bears at complacency and the super bulls in disbelief. Now, if I bring this down into our daily, and I actually find my chart, there it is, and I just move my accumulation phases out of the way, I think we're better suited into this kind of position. What I'll do is I'm going to go ahead and just remove these ones off. Okay, I'm going to bring back that because I I only want to delete the lines. There we go. And if I take a look at this, we can actually see it playing out a little bit better, right? So, for example, I'd have complacency up here. Okay, I'd have your anxiety down here. It could be that this is your denial. This could be panic, and we could see panic coming down here, and then this being our capitulation before we have the anger, right? So if we start to follow the structure of it, we could kind of see that potentially playing out slightly better. And so let me actually go ahead and just throw some text on here. This is what I did the other day, right? So this up here would be our complacency, sorry, right at the top here. Okay, so that would be our complacency right there. We'd then have to see anxiety about here. Okay, so our anxiety would go in here. And then after this, we'd have our denial, which would fit pretty well here. So we'd have denial. Okay, that would be that one right there. Then we'd have a bit of panic just coming in around here, I think. So panic down here, and then we would have capitulation down here. So that could be where we actually are finding ourselves right now. Okay, so we'd have panic as we move down here, go into the capitulation, we rally on up. And this essentially means that down here at some point, we're going to have anger. Okay, and then once we've had anger, we're going to have the depression, which is going to have to be, all the way down here a little bit further. So I do see this as, where we currently sit, right? We've got a bit further to go. We're not done yet. And we could see ourselves, basically coming down into this anger phase, rallying back up again, and then dropping down into the depression phase. And then once that is done, then we get that move out, and then we go into the disbelief, and we start to really kind of move on up quite nicely. So, it's interesting things to unfold. And as I said previously, there's the big concern that I have with this potential capitulation is that we have this three-wave drop taking us down deeper, and that could be sub $10,000 and gets us into that depression range. So ultimately, that's kind of where things sit at the moment on this daily chart. Weekly chart looks like complacency, and if I drop this down even lower, right, it will probably look like we're in disbelief. So it's important that we understand that it's all about the perception of the analyst drawing it on, and it's important that we reflect on many different ways, right? I think we have to take a fundamental stance on the market. We have to kind of think about where we are in the economy, where the economy is overall, and whether or not that's going to support the idea of a bullish environment or not. And ultimately everything's going to come down to supply and demand, and who's currently got the demand, who's got the supply at the moment, and who's got the demand at the moment, and is that in the right hands? Because until large funds are coming in, scooping up significant amounts of Bitcoin, it's going to be hard to think about price being pushed up in any significant way, in my opinion. But let me know what your thoughts are in the comments down below. Do you think that we are in disbelief? Do you think we're in complacency? Or do you agree with me that maybe what we're experiencing right now is just capitulation before we have anger and depression? Really interested to kind of canvass people's thoughts and opinions on that one. And if you found it useful, smash the like button. If you're new, subscribe. If you haven't yet joined us in Discord, check it out, linked below. Until the next one though, guys, have a fantastic day.
We are not financial advisors. None of what we have communicated verbally or in writing here should be considered as financial advice. It is not. Do your own research before investing in any digital asset or affiliate offers, and understand that investing in any crypto is risky. If you do, you need to be prepared to risk your entire investment. This video is for information and entertainment purposes only. All our videos are strictly personal opinions. Please make sure you do your own research and never take our opinions for financial guidance. There are multiple strategies, and not all strategies fit all people. Our videos are not financial advice.